That's a really good point, because actually Richard calls the fingerprints soul psychology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter, and I tell clients this in readings, it doesn't really matter what your belief system is. I respect all belief systems. I've had a variety of them in my life. But if you look at fingerprints in your hands from like a karmic perspective, like a past life perspective, as if it were true, whether you believe in it or not, it gives a frame for reading hands, and it can help to explain, why are my fingerprints this way, and I'm in a service consciousness, whereas everybody else around me is in a peace consciousness. I'm totally different from everybody in my family. Mm-hmm. And using that model of past lives, of karma, whatever you want to believe, you can talk about, well, maybe this is, what you needed to develop this time around.
Right.
It's a framework for talking about it that helps us make sense out of some of those universal sort of unknown questions that we all have. But it's a fascinating rabbit hole to go down, and I love talking about that kind of stuff.
Oh, so do I. I think that is fascinating. As a matter of fact, let's just talk about it. If, for instance, this is a trait that's passed on maybe over lifetimes, wouldn't it be interesting to find someone or historic prints that matched yours currently? I mean, everyone knows that fingerprints are individual, and you can't, duplicate the fingerprints and or combination of fingerprints on people's hands. But I'm wondering if anyone could ever come up with a combination of past prints of a person who lived before matching their very own or something very similar. That would be an interesting thing.
It would be. It would be. I know Richard has in his archives, probably well over, probably over 100,000 pairs of hands. His readings that he's done, as well as his students and colleagues that they've done and compiled. But there are no two hands that are identical. There just aren't.
Wow.
We're unique, and even if the past life scenario is what happens or some version of that, we're different from life to life, and we learn as we go along, and our hands reflect those changes. So I should probably mention that I talked about fingerprints. They're lifelong and they don't change, but everything else in the hands is up for grabs. It's changeable.
Really?
I have your prints here from just a couple days ago, and if I were to take your prints again in 6 months or a year or even next week, there would be some difference. Sometimes it's really subtle, but I have a collection of my own handprints that I've been taking over the last 6 years that I've been studying scientific hand analysis, and things have changed. Lines have come and gone. Gift markers have come and gone. Fingers have changed their positions, and they do reflect how we change as we grow and we learn and we experience new things in our life. And I like to think anyway that I'm getting wiser. I'm getting a little smarter as I age. That's reflected. Those patterns that change are reflected in changes in my hands. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, that is fascinating, Michelyn. The idea being that potentially you could take someone's handprints from different stages in their lives and find the potential changes in their, personalities, attitudes, feelings, even?
Yes. Maybe they had a marker that indicated that they really need to step up their leadership potential or their leadership activities, and they're experiencing a backlash of not using their personal power.
Mm-hmm.
And so they might be in an uncomfortable place around power, and it's reflected in how they're helping everyone else to become powerful and helping other people reflect, their dreams and their aspirations, and then they take a step towards their own power and their own achievements, and they've learned that it's not just about getting others to the goal, but I have goals too, and it's important for me to pay attention to myself. And that's a really deep, profound lesson that, may take years to really internalize and assimilate. And sometimes the markers that indicate that we really need to step up our own personal power can actually disappear in the hands after we've learned how to do that.
Fascinating.
So it is so fascinating. There's not a predictive element to hand analysis, like I've said before, but by looking at the changes in the hands over time, it's fascinating to then talk to the client about, well, you had this marker then and you don't have it now. What's changed about that? And let's look at that. Let's look at what you've been going through since those first prints were taken.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The correlations are just too strong. Sometimes I look back at this journey that I've been on for 6 years of reading hands, and I think, this is crazy. I can look at the hands and talk to you about relationships. That's crazy. But I've done it. I've read 1,000 pairs of hands now, and I know it's true. So I can't explain to you how it all works or why it all works this way, but I know for a fact that when I look at your heart line, I can talk to you about your relationship style, and it's going to work, and it's going to make sense to you, and I can help you make peace with that. It just blows me away.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
What you're saying right now is fascinating, because I was flashing back to the First Nation American Indians, who basically had what they called the Grandmother Council. That was kind of like the the Supreme Court of the tribe. You had a dispute or anything like that, you brought it to certain levels to be resolved, and finally the last stop was the very wise old women, typically single women in the tribe. The idea being that maybe they've learned so much over their lifetime that they were able to help, make those big decisions that had to be made. But then I got to thinking, well, is it possible that the markers that would show people are learning, the lessons that they need to learn, would go backwards with age? Is there any analysis that you've run across that says, well, this person is not doing as well as they should have been at this point in their life?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think of any specific examples that I might have.
In other words, if you had some, prints of people over a period of time, does it always mean that they're probably progressing in what they need to learn in their lifetime, or have you run across the idea that people maybe go backwards in some respects and need to work on things a lot more later in life than earlier? I don't know.
I'll give you an example of my grandmother. How's that? She was, I think she was 92 when she passed, and I do have her handprints. And her life purpose in her fingerprints was what we call in the hand speak, don't worry, be happy. Okay? So she had a relationship with worry and happiness from before she was even born. 5 months before birth, these were her fingerprints.
Yes.
So you would think someone with those fingerprints would be a worrier at some point in their life, and they may or may not figure out how to be a little more relaxed about worrying. And in my opinion, she never did. She was a worrier, a world-class worrier, all my life, up until the day she died. So I know that there were challenges in her life that she overcame. She grew up in the Dust Bowl of Oklahoma, and she left that, married young, and left that to come to Washington and start over, and started a family, and had a big, boisterous, wonderfully close family for the most part. But she was always a worrier. So I don't know if I would say she went backwards in that, but I think part of her reason for being here was to struggle with worry, maybe let it go for a while, put it back on, let it go for a while, and have a relationship with that. Unfortunately, it was one of the major overtones of her life that shaped all of us in the family.
I'll bet it does. That's another point to think that not only does your own handprints, or do your own handprints, kind of not foretell, but give you, things that you need to work on potentially, or show a little bit of some of the challenges that you're dealing with, but also it interacts with your relationships with your family. Even though people have different handprints, they have to deal not only with their own markers, but with other people's markers in their family, I would imagine.
Yeah, and when you can look at each family member's hand, which I've done before with family readings, it gets real fast. Because I can call Dad out on what he's been doing, and I can call the kids out on what they've been doing, and I can call Mom out, and I say that in a joking way, but I call attention to the dynamics of their hands. And I think it's really important to say that I think that I believe, and I know from looking at 1,000 pairs of hands, that each of the markers and indicators is really just it's part of our essence. It's part of who we are. And I talked about power earlier. So if you have a strong power marking in your hand, think of it as like you're on a teeter-totter with power. And you might be on one end of the teeter-totter for a while, and then something happens and you're able to move to the other end of the teeter-totter. And then you might just be able to stand in the middle of the teeter-totter and not be on either end and balance both sides. So you might feel powerful, you might feel powerless, right? You might have moments where you feel kind of like a bully, and you might have other moments when you feel like a victim, right? And you might be able to also stand in the middle of the teeter-totter and say, I am a powerful person with the potential to go to either side and to experience the whole rich realm of possibility around power. Reading hands allows you to see that teeter-totter and that whole continuum of possibility about any one marker in the hand. And then you mix them together and you come up with this wonderful, delicious soup that is you, and you start to see the teeter-totter of you. And how am I balanced right now? Am I off to one side too much? Am I off to the other side? Am I flipping back and forth? Or do I spend a good amount of time right around the center and choosing when I want to go to one side or the other? That's when life gets easier. That's when life makes sense. That's when we start to feel good about ourselves and who we are, and we appreciate our uniqueness. So I think that's part of my reason for coming to hands, and part of my mission now in bringing this message out.